Hi, I'm OZ Hall. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. This video picks up where my introductory Behringer System 55 versus 1977 Minimoog video left off. See a link above to that video if you have not watched it yet. In this video, I create sounds on the Minimoog, then try to duplicate these sounds as closely as possible on the Behringer System 55. This may answer the question, does the System 55 really have the Moog sound? To keep the playing consistent between the two instruments, I'm driving them from a sequencer. I'm using the Akai MPC Live 2 for this purpose. One other note is that I will be using the Minimoog Souond Charts book for some of these sounds. This book by Tom Ray was included by Moog with every new Minimoog purchased. I purchased only the book in the late 70s. See the description for a link to an online version of the sound charts in this book. The first sound that we're going to try to duplicate is a trumpet sound, and I've created that sound from page 10 of the sound charts book on the Minimoog, and I've replicated it as closely as possible with the System 55 when we're going to mute everything but the Moog and listen to that, and then we're going to switch to the System 55, and then we'll add a background and listen to both of them at the same time. And that's the trumpet sound from page 10 of the Minimoog Souond Charts book. While we have the trumpet patched, I want to show the variations possible with just change of a waveform. The trumpet uses a sawtooth waveform. To get a flute-like patch, switch to the triangle waveform. I'm just going to unplug that one. Many of the other parameters will stay the same. You may want to switch to just a single oscillator. Also, you may want to change the octave range to match that of a flute. Now change to the pulse wave output. I've set the pulse wave to a square. The result is a clarinet sound. So that's an example of how changing the waveform can make a dramatic difference in the sound of the instrument. Also, don't forget the possibilities of changing from a square wave to a pulse wave of different widths. It can have a dramatic effect on the timbre of the sound. The next sound is Rick Wakeman's Catherine of Aragon sound from page 16. We're going to play these directly from the keyboard because they are legato sounds and it's just a filter sweep. Here's the Minimoog. And here is the System 55. The timing's not precisely the same, but they're very similar. So that's the Catherine of Aragon sound. I have one more example to share, but at this point I wanted to reflect on an observation that I once read about the difference in sound between a Minimoog and an ARP Odyssey. I believe that this observation was attributed to David Friend of ARP Instruments. In essence, he said that there is more variation in sound from one synth to another of the same model than there is between a Minimoog and an ARP Odyssey. This may sound difficult to believe, but one should bear in mind that most of the resistors used at the time were spec'd at 5% tolerance. When you accumulate this 5% variation throughout the entire system, it seems possible that there could be significant variation in the sound of one Minimoog to another. In addition, in the early 70s, integrated circuits were fairly new and varied in performance and longevity. This would have contributed to the variation from one unit to another. To further support this idea, I read another quote from Rick Wakeman, who owned a number of Minimoogs, perhaps 10 at the time. He said that each of his Minimoogs sounded different from the others. I'd like to suggest at this point that it is possible to make a System 55 sound extremely close to the sound of a vintage Minimoog. Having said that, I have one last example that I wanted to show that does reflect an observable difference between the two synths. By the way, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I've set up a patch with a single sawtooth waveform. This sawtooth is going through the entire signal path on each synth. The settings I've created are: the mixer levels are set to max, the emphasis and resonance on the filter are set to off, and the filter cutoff is set to max. This configuration should provide the waveform only modified by the mixer level and the VCA circuitry. Here is the Minimoog output shown on the oscilloscope. Here's the System 55 output shown on the oscilloscope. Minimoog 55. Here are both outputs at the same time. I'll reduce the sound as we look at some differences. The three things I want to draw your attention to are: number one, the System 55 waveform in blue seems to be the most symmetrical. Note that the waveform is symmetrical around the ground level in the vertical center of the display. The positive peak and the negative peak are the same amplitude or distance from the ground level in the center. Compare the Minimoog in yellow, which seems to have an offset. It doesn't go as far in the negative direction as it does in the positive direction. The second observation, both waveforms seem to reset to the high level almost instantaneously. The reset line in the positive peak is virtually straight up. If we close the filter, this excursion to the peak will take a noticeably longer time as the cutoff is lowered. Number 3. Finally, the Minimoog Sawtooth does not slope from top to bottom in a straight line. The System 55 in blue does do this. I don't know whether this difference is audible. Also, I don't know why the angle of the slope is not consistent between the two machines. So that wraps up my comparison of the System 55 and the vintage Minimoog. I'd love to hear your observations and opinions about this comparison. Thanks for watching.